Greetings. In this video, we're going to be discussing and filling out the Condo Rider, also known as the Condominium Rider for residential contracts. The Condominium Rider is used when the sale of a particular property has a condominium association. An application to the condo association is required for approval to live in the community, and in most situations required for the actual sale of the particular property to commence. The buyer has to be approved by the condo association to live and purchase in the community, and this particular document is what that is used for. Please take note that the Condo Rider is different from the HOA rider, which is a homeowners association rider it stands for. A homeowners association is different from a condominium association. Condominiums are, as it says, it's a condominium, and homeowners associations are usually used for communities that have single family homes, villas. They're not actual condos with units and so forth, and usually multi-story. So that's just a quick side note. In this particular video, we're going to be discussing the Condo Rider. Before we begin filling out this contract, I want to take a brief moment to introduce our company. For those who are new and this is their first video, Nizz Realty Incorporated is a 100% real estate commission brokerage. This means that we pay realtors 100% of your real estate commission, and we have $0 agent fees. The only fee that we charge is a transaction fee upon closing a deal, and we let you decide that transaction fee amount. We believe that the best way to do business is to allow you to choose the transaction fee price so that you're happy and you know that you're receiving the best deal. For more information, feel free to read the description below. Visit our website at nizzrealty.com, or feel free to give us a call or email us. Without further delay, let's get into this video and start discussing about the Condo Rider. So in the beginning here, you're going to be filling out pretty standard information. You're going to be filling out the seller and buyer's information and the property address. So let's say the seller today is John Doe, and let's say the buyer is Billy Bob, just to put some names there for to fill this contract out. The next part is the address. Make sure you fill out the full address here. As mentioned in many of our other videos, a lot of realtors or anyone filling this out tend to forget to fill out the full address. They leave the city out or the zip, which is completely unacceptable. Fill in the complete address and do not leave anything out. For this, we'll use this address over here in Happy Street, Sunrise, Florida. It's a just a number and address that I made up, but make sure you include everything with the address. Include the city, the zip, the state. I've seen a lot of times individuals or realtors forget to fill this out, but it's pretty simple and unacceptable if you don't fill it out. Let's move on to the next part of the contract. You'll have the buyer's and seller's initial here up on the top. Make sure you don't forget to have everyone initial, all the sellers and all the buyers. Then the next part is actually getting into the Condo Rider. The association's approval of the buyer is or is not required. You'll fill this out as needed. Most of the time the approval is required, so we're going to say and mark it is. And this contract is contingent upon buyer being approved by the association no later than, you're going to fill this in here. It says you could leave it blank by 5 days prior to closing, but I like to usually fill in the date. This is completely up to you and how you want to fill this out. Usually 5 days prior to closing is good. I like to put a date personally. So let's say we're going to be closing on let's say the 30th of November. Let's say we want to have this completed by the 20th or the 25th. So we'll just write it like that. Whoops. In this part here, it's basically filling out. You could leave this blank. I like to fill things in because I don't like to leave anything blank. Is within X amount of days after effective date, seller shall initiate the approval process with the association, and buyer shall apply for such approval. This is basically how long until the buyer should be applying to the association. So if you have an executed contract, let's say on the 1st of November, You usually want them applying to the association 3 to 5 days after the contract is executed is a good amount of time, but it's completely up to you and your clients if you want to make that longer or shorter. Just, from my personal and professional opinion, 3 to 5 days is usually good. Once you have an executed contract, you don't want to be waiting too long to apply to the association, because some associations take some time to get an approval. Some can take a full 30 days. Others can get back to you in a couple of weeks. It really just depends on the community and how quickly they like to operate. So for here, let's just say 3 days. That sounds good. In my professional opinion, waiting any more than 3 days to apply to the association once you have an executed contract is it's getting too long. You should apply immediately, if not the next day. 3 is more than enough. Right of first refusal. Does the association have or doesn't have the right of first refusal? In most situations, they do have the right to refuse, depending on if the buyer meets their criteria to live in the community, such as credit, criminal background, income. There's a variety of factors depending on the community. Each community and association has different rules and regulations, and you'll have to, review those as each contract you receive and fill out to understand those type of rules and regulations and requirements. Let's just say in most situations that they have the right of first refusal, which they typically do. Sometimes they don't. So you'll fill out that there. Same thing with this paragraph. The members of the association usually have the right, so you'll fill that out there. If they don't, then you fill out accordingly, but I have never seen a situation or community where they don't have the right of first refusal, especially in condominiums, so we're going to fill it out like I've seen in the many contracts that I filled out, that they have and has the right. So usually always fill out these boxes. If that's not the case, you could contact me if you have further questions, if you have a different situation. This part here, buyer and seller shall, within X amount of days after effective date, sign and deliver any documents required as a condition precedent to exercise the right. So this is the same thing as up here. Usually within 3 to 5 days is a good amount of time. This is just discussing about getting all documentation to the association for submitted for approval and so forth. Usually this is a good amount of time. You could leave it blank if you really want to. My professional opinion, you shouldn't leave anything blank if you don't have to, or put non-applicable there. So for this situation, let's just say 3 days is usually more than enough time. You could put more or less if you want. Moving on. Fees, assessments, prorations, litigation. Most of the time when you fill this out, this is usually there's a monthly or quarterly payments due to the condominium association. Some individuals call it maintenance fees. Other people, they may call it monthly fees or the condo fees. There's a bunch of different wording used for it, but they typically are really called assessments. Monthly assessments, quarterly assessments. You'll fill this out here. Let's say the particular community has a monthly assessment of $300 a month, and you mark $300 there, and that's paid monthly. So the seller, whoever owns the property, pays $300 a month to cover the condo fees, which may include, taking care of the common areas, landscaping, elevator maintenance. Perhaps it covers insurance for the roof, insurance for the building and so forth. Perhaps there's a guard gate, security. That's what your monthly assessments would take care of. Some communities, they do the assessments quarterly. Some they do it semi-annually or annually. Most of the time it's that I've seen out of the many contracts I've done is they're either requesting monthly assessments or quarterly assessments. So in this particular contract we're drafting, let's just keep it simple and say that there's a monthly assessment of $300. If there's anything additional, like additional recreation area fees or other association assessment fees, maybe there's a special assessment that's been made because the roof has been severely damaged. So the association could say to all the owners, the building's roof has been deteriorating over the years. We're now making a special assessment. So if your monthly maintenance was $300, we're now increasing it to, let's say another $100 or $200 a month, and then you'd fill it out there. This really just depends in the particular situation. For this contract we're drafting here, for example purposes, we're not going to fill this out. If you have the situation, you could contact me and I'll let you know my advice on how to fill it out, but that's basically what this is for. is if there's a special assessment, all the unit owners are going to be charged an extra, whatever, $100 a month, let's say, to repair the roof over the next 12 to 24 months. Then you'll put that here, and that's the special assessment that's being paid. Or maybe there's recreation areas. Perhaps there's a clubhouse that, it's not mandatory, but if you want to have access to it, there's an extra maybe $50, $200 a month to have access to a clubhouse area with the tennis courts or something of that nature. Really, we're going to leave this blank for this contract to keep it simple, but that's where you would fill this out here and mark it accordingly as how it's paid. Contact me if you have further questions about this. For now, let's just say there's a monthly assessment of $300 a month for the condominium association, and let's move on. The next part here is also discussing about special assessments and prorations. Most of the time, you fill this in as you need. It really depends. I've seen this filled out, and many times I haven't seen it filled out because it's not necessary. Seller represents that seller is not aware of any special or other assessment that has been levied by the association or that has been an item of the agenda. So you'll fill this out if they know anything and so forth. If they don't know anything, I like to not leave this blank, just put non-applicable. Let's say the seller doesn't know any special assessments. There's no special assessments that have been addressed or anything like that. We're doing a normal sale and so forth with nothing, no special assessments. So we'll write non-applicable just to not leave it blank. But if there is something going on, like I said before, maybe the roof is being repaired and special assessments have been made. Maybe the pool, the community pool is being redone and remodeled, and they have special assessments for that. You'll fill this in there accordingly. Same thing with this paragraph. This is discussing if there is special assessments, who's going to pay after closing. If it's going to be the seller paying the special assessment in full, let's say they're repairing the roof, as I said before, and there's special assessments for the next 12 months. If you're going to mark this as seller, that means when the contract closes, the seller is going to pay the rest of those assessments off. Usually that doesn't happen. Sometimes, depending on negotiations, you may negotiate that for a different sales price. Most of the time, it's usually the buyer that takes over. So let's say there's 12 months left on the special assessment. The seller keeps paying every month until the day comes when closing happens, and then the buyer takes over the rest of the payments. For this particular contract, let's say that's what's happening in this example. The buyer is going to take over any type of special assessments, if there is any. For this particular contract, there is nothing known, so it's just good to fill this out, just to not leave it blank, but the buyer is not going to have to take over anything, but if there is, they would. As we move on, litigation, seller represents that seller is not aware of pending or anticipated litigation affecting the property, common areas. This is maybe if there's liens on the property or anything like that. I've almost never seen any type of situation like that. Usually it's known beforehand and it's negotiated who's going to be taking over or paying off the liens or anything of that nature. If there is something like that going on, you'd fill it out here. Most of the time, usually it's not going on, and if it is, it's discussed in the contract, and you could fill it out here to have it additionally stated in the paperwork. But for this particular deal, let's say non-applicable, it's not filling out. If you have a situation like this, I suggest you contact me so we could discuss further how to fill this out and what to put here if there's something going on with the property. The next paragraph's here. It's basically some disclosures. The buyer hereby acknowledges that buyer has been provided a current copy of the Declaration of Condominium Articles of Incorporation. Most of the time, A is usually chosen. You could mark B also here if the agreement is voidable by buyer by delivering written notice of the buyer's intention to cancel within 3 days. Most of the time, this isn't really marked. Most of the time, I've always seen A marked. If you're going to be filling out Part B, I recommend you contact me first so I can explain if that's within the best interest and so forth. But usually it's A that's marked, and almost all the time the seller is going to be providing the condo documents, the articles of incorporation, all the bylaws, rules and regulations, and they're going to be providing that to the buyer before closing, at least copies of it, so they have that and you can read through it and understand all the rules, regulations, the bylaws, the articles of incorporation, all those important documents. So just leave it at A. If you do need to fill out B and you're going this route, I'd recommend you contact me first before you do that, just to make sure you understand what you're doing. For now, let's move on. The buyer's request for documents. Most situations, the seller is going to provide the documents. Some situations, the seller doesn't have any of the documents. That may be a case if the property was recently probated, the new seller inherited the property and doesn't have any of those documents and is, unable to acquire them, then you'd fill this out that the buyer is not going to receive those documents. You may want to include that in the contract that, the seller's not required to provide those and doesn't have any access to that information, just so it's been disclosed. Most of the time, it's pretty easy for the new seller to contact the association and just acquire those documents so they have it, and you don't have to go that route and make things complicated and do things how it's traditionally done. The seller provides these documents. So for this particular example, let's just say the buyer requests these documents and they're going to receive them. Then this part here, buyers receive the documents on whatever date. Let's say they receive it by the 6th of November, whatever date you put there. Then they'll, pretty much you'll mark that this is the day they received all the documents they're requesting. And this last part here is just filling out, how many maybe parking spaces they get. It's in a condo, building and so forth, like a high-rise or, even a smaller building with only maybe 2-3 stories. They might have 1 or 2 parking spaces. Usually there's only 1. Sometimes there's more. If there's garage, some communities they have separate garages for certain units. So maybe there's a garage. You just fill this out accordingly. And anything other, maybe there's some other parking amenities and so forth. You just fill this out accordingly. Most of the time I've seen it's either 1 parking space or 1 garage space. If there's something different going on, you fill it out as needed. That's the end of the Condo Rider. It's short form, a few things to look over and make sure you fill out correctly. But this is the most standard way of filling it out. If you're doing or have anything special that's going on, then you'll fill it out accordingly. If you have any questions, contact me. But it's a pretty simple document. It's nothing too crazy. Hopefully this video was helpful, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you.